10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 62. Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 62 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This week we're going to be wrapping up our series on upper structures. This is part 3. If you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, I suggest you go back and do that. We talk about the major chord in episode 1. We talk about the minor chord in last week's episode. And this week we're finally getting to the most complicated chord, which is the dominant chord. This gives us the most options for upper structure notes, and we're really going to be covering a lot of ground in today's podcast, so we're going to jump right into it. Remember, you can get the PDF for these at 10minutejazzlesson.com. That's the number 10minutejazzlesson.com, and I highly suggest having the PDF in front of you when you actually are listening to the episode this week, because there's going to be a lot of information flying at you. All right, so let's first talk about the dominant chord. So we know with the dominant chord, we have 1, 3, 5, flat 7. And we're going to go over 3 different qualities of dominant chords this week. We're going to start with just the regular, pure dominant 7th chord with a natural 9 and a natural 13 and a sharp 11. Then we're going to move into when you see a C7 flat 9 chord, we know that implies diminished dominant, so that some of the extensions change, right? We're going to have a flat 9, a sharp 9, a sharp 11, and a 13 on that one. And then we're going to finish up with our C7 altered chord, which if you haven't listened to the altered chord episodes, make sure you go and do that. On that one, we have flat 9, sharp 11, and flat 13. Covering a lot of ground today. So let's start with the pure C7 chord. So we have our 1, 3, 5, 7, C, E, G, B flat. Then we have a natural 9, which is D. We have the sharp 11. Now the sharp 11 always sounds better than the natural 11 over both a major 7th chord and a dominant 7th chord. So make sure you get into the habit of using that sharp 11. Then we jump up to the 13 and then right back down those extensions and right back down the chord tones. So let me play that for you on piano so you can hear what it sounds like. So there's our pure dominant 7th chord with none of the extensions altered at all. Now you can choose to use that anywhere you want. The only time you shouldn't use that is if you see the flat 9 attached to the dominant 7th chord. The natural 9 is never going to work when the chord that's being played by the rhythm section is a flat 9. So let's talk about that one. We know that implies diminished dominant, which leaves us with both a flat 9 and a sharp 9. And then we keep that sharp 11 and we keep the natural 13. So the extensions sound a little bit different. They're going to give us much more of a crunchy sound over the top of this. And it gives us many more options as far as really, really interesting sounding notes. So here is what the extensions on a C7 flat 9 chord sound like. So there's your C7 flat 9. The sharp 9 is a really, really interesting note, and you have to kind of remember that the sharp 9 is used over that chord. You can omit it if you want to, and just play flat 9 in the regular third, but just know that it's in there, because if you take a look at our diminished dominant scale, our half whole scale, it does contain the sharp 9. So it's important to put it in there. You don't need to see a C7 sharp 9 chord in order to use that sharp 9. You can use it over the flat 9 chord. All right, and then the final chord for today is going to be a C7 altered chord. And the only difference between this and the flat 9 chord is instead of playing that natural 13, what we're going to do is we're going to play a flat 13 over that. It's the only difference. The extensions are still flat 9, sharp 11, but now it's flat 13 instead of the natural 13, which is going to give it even more of a crunchy sound. It's going to give it even more tension. But it is important to only use this when you see that C7 altered chord symbol, or the other time that you can use it is if you were to see the chord symbol of C7 sharp 9. That basically means altered as well. Here's what those extensions sound like over a C7 chord. So there's your 3 different chord qualities that we're going to be working with today. One thing I want to do before I get into actually playing some material over the top and talking about the different structures we can use is let you hear all 3 of those chords harmonically. So what you're going to hear is you're going to hear 3 block chords. The first block chord you're going to hear is going to be that pure C7 with the 9, sharp 11, 13. The second one is going to be the C7 flat 9. So on that one, you're going to hear the flat 9, the sharp 11, the 13 over the top of it. And the third one is going to be your altered chord. So we're going to add that sharp 9, and we're also going to flat the 13. Here's what they sound like harmonically. All right, so now you know what they sound like when they're arpeggiated out, note by note, and you also know what they sound like harmonically when all the notes are stacked on top of each other and played as a voicing. All right, so now let's get into the interesting stuff. What can you use as a structure to play over the top of these chords and really highlight these extensions? Well, let's start with the pure C7 chord. One of the things you can do, just as you would have on a major 7 chord, is you could play the triad based off of the 9th, the major triad based off of the 9th. So the first thing you can do is you could play a D major triad over the top of a C7 chord, and that just sounds fantastic. That is, again though, you cannot use this when you see any type of altered 9th in the chord symbol. This is for a regular, pure, dominant 7th chord. Here's what it sounds like to play in the key of D major over the top of a C7 chord. All right, so that's the pure dominant, which you can hear is based off of the regular 9th, the major 9th, whatever you want to call it. Now the second one is playing the triad, a tritone up from the C7. So playing an F sharp major triad over a C7 chord. So this is also known as the tritone substitution, right? Talked a little bit about this, but this is really based off of the upper structures. So let's think about what upper structures it's based off of. If we form an F sharp major triad, we have F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. So over C7, what we have is the sharp 11, right? The 7th, the flatted 7th, and the flat 9. So this one works really, really well over that C7 flat 9 chord because you're utilizing that flat 9 tension. You're also using the 7th, and you're using that sharp 11. You're using 2 of those extensions that we wrote out over that. And this is the most dissonant thing you can possibly do. So what I like to do when I'm practicing playing my tritone sub is I go back and forth in between the root triad, which would be a C major triad, and then the triad based off of the tritone away. So what I'm going to do is I'm not just going to hang out on the F sharp major triad. I'm going to actually go back and forth between a C major triad and an F sharp major triad. I think that's what sounds best over this. But here is what the tritone substitution sounds like. So that's a very dissonant one, but also a really, really interesting sound to use over that dominant chord. So I don't want to get too complicated in this episode, but I did want to give you one thing that utilizes the sharp 9, since we talked about it a little bit. So this would be an E flat major triad over the top of a C7 chord. And this doesn't really use that many tensions, but it does use the sharp 9. So if you look at an E flat major triad over a C7 chord, the notes that we get are the sharp 9, the 5, and the 7. So really it's almost like we're taking a piece of the C7 chord tones, but instead of playing the third, we're playing the sharp 9 as the root of our triad. And this will give us an interesting tension. It's nothing super exciting, but I wanted to leave you guys with something you could do with the sharp 9. Here's what that sounds like. All right, so there you have it. Those are the 3 different examples that I wanted to present to you today. We could spend hours and hours and hours on this subject of playing extensions over dominant chords because there are so many possibilities, but obviously I can't go into that and keep these episodes nice and short. So if you have any questions, if you're wondering what the next step might be, make sure you get in touch with me, 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. All right, hopefully you guys benefited from that episode. I will see you next week with something brand new. Have a good one, everybody.